I never expected my own engagement party to feel like a funeral. The crystal champagne flute trembled in my hand as my mother's perfectly manicured fingers dug into my shoulder, steering me toward the center of our grand dining room. The room buzzed with anticipation, but all I could hear was the thundering of my heart. My name is Harper, and this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. At least, that's what my mother kept telling everyone. "Darling, smile," she whispered through gritted teeth. "The Harrisons are watching." I forced my lips upward, catching my reflection in the antique mirror across the room. The emerald green dress my mother had chosen made me look like a porcelain doll, perfect, polished, and completely lifeless. Blake Harrison, my soon-to-be fiancé, stood chatting with my father near the fireplace. He looked every bit the part in his tailored suit, all charm and calculated smiles. Nobody else seemed to notice how his eyes constantly tracked my movement across the room, like a predator studying its prey. "Ladies and gentlemen," my mother's voice rang out, cutting through the murmur of conversation. "We have a very special announcement tonight." My sister Clara shot me a knowing look from across the room. She'd been through this before, the carefully orchestrated family performances that mother loved so much. But unlike me, Clara had always played her part perfectly. Blake made his way toward me, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. I felt the weight of 50 pairs of eyes bearing down on us. This wasn't how I'd planned to spend my 19th birthday. "Harper Bennett," Blake began, reaching for my hand. His grip was just tight enough to hurt. "From the moment your mother introduced us." I zoned out as he launched into his rehearsed speech. All I could think about was the acceptance letter hidden under my mattress, my secret escape plan to a college 3,000 miles away. A plan that was about to be destroyed by one little word I was expected to say. "Will you marry me?" Blake's voice snapped me back to reality. He was down on one knee now, holding up a ring that probably cost more than my father's car. The room held its breath. My mother's nails dug deeper into my shoulder. Through the crowd, I caught my father's eye. For just a moment, I saw something there, a flicker of concern, maybe even regret. "Aye!" My voice cracked. The room started spinning, and the champagne flute slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. The gasps that filled the room were nothing compared to the scream building in my throat. The morning after my disastrous engagement party, I found my father in his study, nursing a glass of whiskey at 10 in the morning. He didn't look surprised when I slipped inside and closed the door behind me. "I said yes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I actually said yes." Dad set his glass down and gestured to the worn leather chair across from his desk. The same chair where I used to sit and watch him work when I was little, back when everything made sense. "Your mother can be persuasive," he said, choosing his words carefully. "But Harper, you don't have to." A sharp knock interrupted him. Blake's voice carried through the door. "Harper? Margaret said you'd be in here." "That's expression d'arkenid." He pressed a finger to his lips and pointed to the hidden door behind his bookshelf. My childhood escape route to the garden. I'd barely slipped through when Blake entered the study. "Daniel," Blake's voice oozed confidence. "I was hoping to discuss the prenuptial agreement. My father's lawyers have drafted something." I pressed my ear against the wall, straining to hear their conversation. The prenup wasn't a surprise. The Harrisons were old money after all. But what Blake said next made my blood run cold. "Of course, we'll need Harper to withdraw her college applications. Long-distance relationships rarely work, and a wife's place is with her husband." There was a long pause before my father spoke. "That's not your decision to make. With all due respect, sir, Margaret agrees with me. Harper's too young to know what she wants. She needs guidance." I bit my lip to keep from screaming. Through the crack in the door, I could see Blake standing there, looking every bit the concerned fiancé. But his words revealed the truth. I wasn't a partner to him, I was a possession. "I think," my father said slowly, "you should leave my study now." Once Blake's footsteps faded, I emerged from my hiding place. Dad was staring at his whiskey glass again, but this time his hands were shaking. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he whispered. "I should have protected you better." I pulled the crumpled acceptance letter from my pocket and placed it on his desk. "It's not too late." He smoothed out the paper, reading the university's name. His eyes widened. "California? 3,000 miles away," I said. "Far enough." A small smile crossed his face, the first real one I'd seen in months. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out his checkbook. "I think it's time I started being the father you deserve." As he wrote, I heard my mother's voice in the hallway calling my name. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of her finding me. I found Clara in the garden that evening, chain-smoking the cigarettes she thought Mother didn't know about. The sunset painted her face in shades of orange and red, making her look older than her 24 years. "You're making a mistake," she said, not looking at me. "Blake isn't who you think he is." "You mean he isn't who Mother thinks he is?" I replied, settling beside her on the stone bench. Clara's hand trembled as she took another drag. "Did you know he was engaged before? To Melissa Carter?" The name hit me like a slap. Melissa had been Clara's best friend in high school, until she suddenly moved away senior year. No goodbyes, no explanations. "What happened?" "The same thing that's happening to you." Clara finally turned to face me, her eyes glistening. "Control. Isolation." But Melissa fought back harder than I did. "Then you did." The words hung in the air between us. Clara crushed her cigarette under her heel. 3 years ago, Mother arranged for me to date James Harrison, Blake's cousin. I thought I was in love. Turns out I was just well-trained. A chill ran down my spine despite the warm evening. "Clara, what are you saying?" "The Harrisons collect people, Harper. They're all like Blake, charming in public, monsters in private." "James." She swallowed hard. "Let's just say I learned to smile through the bruises." The garden suddenly felt too small, too confined. Like the walls of my perfect life were closing in. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was ashamed. Because Mother said it was my fault. Because," Clara's voice cracked, "because I'm still seeing someone Mother would never approve of, and I can't bear to disappoint her again." Before I could respond, Blake's voice carried across the garden. "There you are, darling." Clara grabbed my hand, squeezing it painfully tight. "Whatever you're planning with Dad, do it fast. Blake knows about the acceptance letter." My heart stopped. "How?" "Mother found it this morning. She's already called the university to decline your admission." Blake appeared around the corner, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Having a sister chat?" Clara stood, straightening her shoulders like a soldier preparing for battle. "Just giving Harper some big sister advice about marriage." "How thoughtful," Blake said, wrapping an arm around my waist. His fingers dug into my hip, a warning, a claim of ownership. "Though I think Harper's mother has that covered, don't you?" As Clara walked away, she glanced back once. In that look I saw everything, her fear, her regret, and something else. Something that looked like hope. I had 2 weeks until the official engagement party. 2 weeks to escape, or become another Harrison family casualty. The game had changed. This wasn't just about my freedom anymore, it was about survival. The local coffee shop became my sanctuary, the only place Blake wouldn't think to look for me. I was nursing my 3rd latte when someone slid into the seat across from me. "You're Melissa Carter's brother," I said, recognizing the familiar green eyes and dark hair. Lucas Carter nodded, his expression grim. "And you're Blake Harrison's fiancé." The way he said Blake's name made my skin crawl. I glanced at the door, suddenly aware of how exposed we were. "Don't worry," Lucas said, following my gaze. "Blake's at his weekly golf game with your mother. Old family tradition, apparently." "How did you?" "I've been watching him. Ever since Melissa." He trailed off, his hands tightening around his coffee cup. "She's in Seattle now. Changed her name, started over. But the nightmares haven't stopped." My phone buzzed, another text from Blake asking where I was. I turned it face down. "Clara told me what happened," I whispered. "Clara's the reason I found you." Lucas leaned forward. "Look, I know this isn't my business, but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try to warn you." He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of photos. Blake at various society events, always with a different woman. The last photo made my blood run cold. Blake and my mother at lunch yesterday, when she'd claimed to be at her charity meeting. "Your mother's been helping him for months," Lucas said softly. "Setting up accidental meetings, orchestrating the proposal. She did the same thing with Melissa." The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you remind me of my sister. The way you flinch when your phone buzzes. The way you check the exits. The way you're planning something right now behind those scared eyes." I met his gaze, surprised by the understanding I saw there. "I can help," he said. "I have connections, resources. Whatever you're planning, you don't have to do it alone." Before I could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Clara rushed in, her face pale. "Harper, thank God. Blake's on his way." Mother told him. "Of course she did." I cut her off, standing up. Lucas stood too, positioning himself between me and the door. "There's a back exit through the kitchen," he said quickly, pressing a business card into my hand. "My number's on there. Use it." As I followed Clara toward the kitchen, I glanced back. Lucas was already on his phone, speaking urgently to someone. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. 3 days before the engagement party, Mother cornered me in my bedroom. She was holding my phone, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the screen. "Lucas Carter," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Really, Harper?" My heart stopped. I'd deleted his texts, but I'd forgotten about the calls. "He's just Melissa Carter's brother. The same Melissa who tried to ruin Blake's reputation with those ridiculous accusations." Mother sat on my bed, smoothing my comforter with practiced precision. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Through my window, I could see Blake's car pulling into our driveway. Right on schedule. "You don't understand," I said, reaching for my phone. Mother pulled it away. "I understand perfectly. You're young, scared of commitment. But Blake can give you everything: security, status, a future." She stood, straightening her blazer. "Unlike Lucas Carter, who's been investigated twice for harassment." My head snapped up. "What? Oh yes. Your father did some digging. Lucas has quite the history of interfering with happy couples, always claiming to be protecting someone." She smiled sadly. "He's obsessed with his sister's story. Sees abuse where there is only love." The doorbell rang downstairs. Mother's smile widened. "Blake's here to take you to dinner. Wear the blue dress he bought you." She headed for the door, then paused. "Oh, and darling? I've already called the police about Lucas's harassment. They'll be speaking with him tonight." The room spun. Everything Lucas had shown me, the photos, the warnings, suddenly seemed suspect. Had I been paranoid? Manipulated? My phone buzzed in Mother's hand. Lucas's name flashed on the screen. "I'll take care of this," she said, declining the call. "You focus on looking beautiful for your fiancé." After she left, I stood frozen, staring at my reflection. The girl in the mirror looked like a stranger, pale, uncertain, wearing a diamond ring that felt heavier by the second. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Despite Mother's control of my phone, she hadn't thought to check my secret email account. It was from Melissa Carter. "Harper, Lucas told me about you. Whatever they're saying about him isn't true. Blake's lawyers tried the same tactics with me. I'm attaching proof of everything: police reports, hospital records, testimonies from other women. Don't let them isolate you like they did to me. There's a ticket to Seattle in your name at the bus station. Valid for the next 48 hours. Use it. P.S. Your sister Clara knows more than she's telling. Ask her about the scars." Downstairs, I heard Blake's laugh mixing with Mother's voice. They were coming up the stairs. I had 48 hours to decide who was lying and who was worth trusting with my life. The engagement party felt like a funeral, and I was the corpse on display. Every smile, every congratulatory handshake pushed me closer to the edge. Blake kept his arm around my waist, his fingers digging into my hip whenever I shifted away. I hadn't seen Clara all evening, but Mother's perfect smile never wavered as she worked the room. Dad stood by the bar on his fourth scotch, avoiding everyone's eyes, especially mine. "Time for the toast," Blake announced, clinking his glass. The crowd gathered around us, a sea of expensive perfume and fake smiles. "I'd like to thank Margaret and Daniel for welcoming me into their family." My phone vibrated in my clutch. A text from an unknown number. "Police found Lucas. Hospital. Critical condition. Car accident on Harrison property." The room started spinning. "And most of all," Blake continued, "I want to thank my beautiful fiancé for making me the happiest man alive." I looked up from my phone to find Blake staring at me, his eyes cold despite his warm smile. He knew. He knew about Lucas, about everything. "Would you like to say something, darling?" Blake's grip tightened. The crowd waited expectantly. Mother's smile turned sharp. Dad finally met my gaze, and in that moment, I saw something I'd never seen before: fear. I stepped away from Blake, his fingers trailing across my back like a threat. "I have something to say." My voice shook, but carried across the silent room. "Clara, where are you?" Movement near the door. Clara emerged from the crowd, her designer dress hiding the scars I now knew existed. "Show them," I said. Clara's eyes widened. "Harper, don't. Show them what the Harrisons did to you. What they did to Melissa. What they're going to do to me." Blake laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I think someone's had too much champagne." "Harper." Mother's voice cut through the murmurs. "That's enough." "No, Mother. For once in my life, it's not enough." I turned to the crowd. "Did you know your perfect son put Melissa Carter in the hospital? That is cousin James." The slap echoed through the room. My cheek burned where Blake's hand had connected. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "I apologize, everyone," Blake said smoothly. "My fiancé is unwell. Too much pressure from the wedding planning. 2 security guards appeared beside me. Harrison family employees. I recognized their uniforms from the compound. Take her upstairs to rest, Blake ordered. I'll be up shortly to comfort her. As they led me away, I caught one last glimpse of the party. Mother dabbing her eyes theatrically, Dad reaching for another drink. Clara frozen in place, and Blake smiling like he'd just won everything. Maybe he had. The security guards locked me in my childhood bedroom, but they forgot about the window seat, the one Clara and I had used to sneak out as teenagers. I was halfway through prying it open when the door clicked. Clara slipped inside, her mascara streaked down her face. You shouldn't have done that. Someone had to. Blake's calling his lawyers. Mother's telling everyone you're having a nervous breakdown. She crossed the room, helping me with the stubborn window. But that's not why I'm here. From beneath her dress, Clara pulled out her phone and played a video. The timestamp showed last week, Blake and Mother in his office. If she tries to leave, Blake was saying, we'll use the trust fund clause. She'll be penniless. Mother's voice was cold. And if she talks about Melissa? The same thing we did to Lucas. Accidents happen. The video ended. Clara's hands shook as she deleted it. How long have you been recording them? I asked. Since James. She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a network of scars. I needed evidence. Insurance. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Clara's eyes widened. The police are downstairs, she whispered. Real ones, not Harrison security. Dad called them. Dad! He finally grew a spine. Clara pushed me toward the window. But they won't get here in time. Blake's coming to calm you down first. The doorknob turned. Clara spun around, positioning herself between me and the door. Go, she hissed. I'll hold them off. Clara, I let them hurt me for years. Let me do this one brave thing. Blake burst in, his perfect mask finally cracking. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Mother, her face twisted with rage. You ungrateful little. Blake lunged forward. Clara met him halfway, her designer heels stomping his instep. Run! I scrambled through the window onto the sloping roof, Blake's curses following me. Below, police lights flashed, casting everything in surreal red and blue. A familiar voice called up. Harper! Lucas stood in the garden, arm in a sling but very much alive. Behind him, Melissa Carter emerged from the shadows, phone raised, recording everything. Jump! Lucas called. We'll catch you. Blake's hand grabbed my ankle. I kicked back, connecting with something solid. He cursed, his grip loosening. In that moment, suspended between sky and ground, past and future, I finally understood. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about breaking the cycle. I jumped. Behind me, Clara screamed in triumph. Below, Lucas and Melissa waited with open arms. And somewhere in the house, a father finally stood up to protect his daughters. I was falling, but for the first time in my life, I felt free. 6 months later, I sat across from my mother in a small cafe in Seattle. She looked different here, smaller somehow, without her usual armor of designer clothes and social status. Clara's doing well in therapy, she said, stirring her untouched coffee. The prosecutor thinks her testimony will ensure Blake and James serve time. I nodded, watching pedestrians hurry past the window. Somewhere across town, Lucas was finishing his shift at the hospital. We'd moved in together last month, after Clara's evidence helped clear his name. Your father sold the house, Mother continued. He said he couldn't sleep there anymore, knowing what happened under that roof. And you? I asked, meeting her eyes for the first time. Where will you go? She flinched at the question. I've been staying with your aunt in Vermont. Learning to be different. Her hand trembled as she reached across the table. Harper, I know I don't deserve. You're right. I cut her off. You don't. She withdrew her hand, nodding slowly. I understand. No, you don't. I pulled out my phone, showing her the text from Clara. A picture of her first day at community college, genuine smile on her face. But you're learning. That's why I agreed to meet. Mother's eyes welled up. I kept telling myself I was protecting you girls, giving you the life I thought you deserved. I never realized I was just recreating my own mother's prison. A young couple walked past our window, laughing free. I remembered that feeling, jumping from my bedroom window, choosing uncertainty over gilded chains. I'm not ready to forgive you, I said quietly. But I'm ready to stop hating you. It takes too much energy. Mother wiped her eyes, smudging her perfect makeup. That's more than I deserve. Probably. I stood, leaving money for the coffee. Clara's birthday is next month. She's having a small party at Dad's new place. You should come, if you're ready to just be her mother, not her keeper. And you, she asked. Will you be there? I thought about Lucas, about the acceptance letter to medical school pinned to our fridge, about the life we were building, messy, imperfect, but ours. Yes, I said. But not for you. For Clara. For Dad. For myself. As I walked away, Mother called out one last time. Harper, I'm proud of you. Not for who I wanted you to be, but for who you've become. I didn't turn around, but I felt something shift, like the last piece of a puzzle falling into place. Not perfect, but complete. Outside, the Seattle rain had stopped. The air smelled like possibility. I headed home, to the life I'd chosen, leaving the ghost of who I was supposed to be behind in that cafe with my mother. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well.